Greetings, sunshines and sunnies. It is I, Queen J Lotus, Pimp Sun Kids. Coming at y'all right quick, right fast. Maybe. But we already discussed this in part 1 of this Lovecraft Country episode 7 review. So yeah, make sure that you caught up, because the way this episode is loaded and the way this whole show is loaded, these these reviews ain't gonna be no right quick, right fast, but I'm gonna say that they're gonna be there anyway. That's why I put that maybe on the end, even though I kinda know for certain that it's gonna be more than right quick, right fast. But especially for this episode and probably for the next couple of episodes. You see, I had to break this one up in 2 parts. And I ain't gonna waste no time, gonna get right into part 2 of this Royale review for Lovecraft Country episode 7, titled I Am. Now, y'all know that this is a Hippolyta heavy episode. It's a whole lot of focus on her in the first part, but not as much as the other characters. It's like they kind of got them out the way in a good way. They balanced it out very well, because in a way, a whole episode worth of stuff happened in the first 30 minutes, and it was very well paced and distributed and everything. However, still heavily revolved around Hippolyta and this orrery. Okay, so in the first part, Letty discovers that Hippolyta had done took the orrery from her house when they had their party. Okay, and that she had done basically cracked the code on it and was likely headed to the destination which the orrery directed her to. So once she spit that information to Tick headed to find Hippolyta, found Hippolyta just in the nick of time when she was getting attacked by some cops. And one thing led to another, push came to shove, literally, and they both got sucked into this portal that the bigger orrery, I guess, created in the midst of the whole tussle and bustle that they had going on with the cops, which lands Hippolyta elsewhere on what looks to be like a different planet, and we know not yet what happened with Tick. Okay, we stay focused on Hippolyta for the multitude of this journey, and I loved to see it, because this is one of the best ways that I've ever seen a character not only be developed but also unraveled right before our eyes, and it's amazing. So like I said, she up here on what seems to be a whole different planet, if not the moon. It's very dark and very rocky. I probably would even say that it's Pluto, but it doesn't look cold, like talking about the way that I've known Pluto to be described. So I would probably say that it's like the moon or just some other planet, because mind you, the orrery had a bunch of those different planets that we don't really talk about, and it had like a whole nother galaxy type shit, like a couple of, what it was, like 12 galaxies or 2 galaxies. Make sure you caught up on the reviews, okay? Because it's discussed in the previous review and episode exactly how many galaxies it is, and it's this whole astrological thing. It's all based on some real shit in real life as it concerns the concept of us like living in a matrix that is an amalgamation of science, you know, the tangible, physical, spiritual, philosophical, mathematical, all that. So all of that is being explored in its own way in this whole series, but in this episode specifically, we see a lot of the depths of that. So yeah, ain't no telling what planet she on. I say all that to say. Now, if she realized where she at, and the fact that she really don't know where she at, she is visibly flabbergasted and fearful, okay? And these two robotic, alien-esque beings walk up to her and zap her into a whole nother place. And it could put you in mind of, I don't know if y'all ever seen, it's a movie called Hardcore Henry. And there's a couple of other different movies, but basically when they have like these top-notch futuristic layered labs or whatever, and it'd be like a whole lot of white, and any cord that you see is very fluorescent and neon colored, and they got like these sleek ass, like hospital-esque, massage-esque beds or whatever. And it could also put you in mind of on SpongeBob when Squidward got stuck in the time machine and it spit him out in this all white world. So yeah, it can also put you in mind in that, but this is like an actual building that she finds herself zapped into, or you could say an actual ship that she finds herself zapped into, bucket naked in the nude. Okay, and I really appreciate the body being shown in this non-sexual way. It's just nude, naked, not perfect, yet beautiful, you know? Emphasizing the imperfections that are necessary for beauty, okay? But Next to her, she finds this jumpsuit that she quickly puts on. Again, still looking very flabbergasted and fearful. And in the midst of her just stumbling around, look at that bootying in that jumpsuit. Don't mind me, but in the midst of her just stumbling around the area, this door slides open, and it's this freakishly tall lady with a big, huge afro, and she looked hella futuristic and like a blast from the past, all at the same time. And she hella pretty. She hella pretty. And this lady looked familiar. When I first watched this, I thought that it was Angelou Ellis, just in a different costume, and like that being was supposed to be just a different version of herself, or a version of herself in an alternate universe or whatever. But I think that's actually that other lady. I can't think of her name either, but I believe she was on In Living Color and some more stuff. Anyway, I'm gonna look up who that lady is, because she hella pretty and she looked real good in that costumage. So yeah, as she pops up standing there all grandiose and everything, Hippolyta is looking at her, still just out her mind, like what the fuck is going on. But she asked the lady, what are you? Like, she didn't say, who are you? She said, what are you? And the lady just says, I am. And so she like, honey, where am I? What is going on? What is happening? What are these things in my arms? Because she got some like little glow battery looking things in her wrist. And I'm gonna hold that thought on that a little bit, because I start to think something else as this scene goes on. So she asked him what the things is in her arms, and the lady just standing there looking at her crazy. And Hip tells her, you can't keep me here, honey. And she tells her, you are not in a prison. I ain't gonna lie, it's kind of funny and also kind of annoying is the way that they say it, if you like put yourself in Hippolyta's shoes. Her saying that lives rent free in my head, and I use that as a mantra if ever and whenever I'm feeling trapped. I just hear her voice in this scene in my head saying, you are not in a prison. So like, it's very freeing at the same time. And this is opening us up to explore Hippolyta realizing and gaining a sense of freedom, realizing that she is not in a prison in more ways than one. So after the big robotic blast from the past looking lady says, you are not in a prison, she just starts to walk out. And Hip is running like, no, let me out, let me out, let me out. And the door closes, slams right in her face, and she stands there and bangs on the door, eventually until it seems her wrist starts to bleed. And then it kind of transitions to Hippolyta sitting like against the wall, or kind of in this spherical type seat or whatever. It's made kind of like a ring from my point of view. Anyway, she's leaning on the wall part of it, and she looks like a self-harmer. And what I mean by that is she's looking very dead in the eyes, and like she's staring into space, and like she is really like on the brink of breaking and giving up, and just sitting there until she just withers away in ashes and smoke type shit. Also, what was once just the little fluorescent battery looking things in her wrist has now become like a cut ring around her wrist. So to me, it appears that what may be being communicated, what may be being communicated through those things in her wrist, and the way that it's now shown as like a cut ring around her wrist, is either communicating that Hippolyta had a suicidal past and used to harm herself by cutting her wrist, slitting her wrist, and or she's been arrested before, or there's some sort of history of incarceration, and or it's like a physical manifestation. You know how suppressed traumas can physically manifest themselves in your body if you don't deal with them. So it could be showing up there in that particular way, in that particular universe and environment, to show that Hippolyta has always felt locked up in prison, trapped. So I know, like, if someone gets arrested and officers put the cuffs on their arms either too tight, and or they stay on there too long, or the person is just like fighting real hard to get out of them, but you know they can't, it then forms those cuts around the wrist, and that's what that looks like. So it seems to be a symbolism of both self-harm and imprisonment, feeling cuffed in the worst way. So yeah, which would also explain the hopelessness on Hippolyta's face and in her body language. So it seems as though the little fluorescent battery looking things in her arms are pulsating and such to try to heal her on some Wolverine shit. And then suddenly she's able to like rip the sleeves off of her jumpsuit. So I am going to sight read the captions of what she's saying in this moment of enlightenment as she comes back to life, and then I'm going to give my thoughts on what it all means. So bear with me and stay with me. So she starts to say, I didn't get dizzy when I was in the ship. Is it a ship? Am I on another planet? The sand was strangely springy. No, I was lighter. Not like Orinthia Blue on Mars, but just enough to feel it in my tendons. Gravity turned down just a notch. Come on, come on, come on. What would Dad say? What would Dad say? Gustave Millet. He warned of gravity shifts in the future. There's no planet with sustainability. Was she human? 64 number settings from 000 to 999. Wondrous music. So in all of that she said is her, in a way, it portrays as if she got a certain sense of euphoria, a certain natural high where whatever chains on her brain just started to fall off and everything just started churning, unfolding, and unraveling and everything. And she started to like really use what she got to get what she wants. Like she could see herself all over again. She could see her memories, everything that she knows and has learned all the way up into this point. Things that are useful specifically to help get her out of this situation. So as she's discussing like what the environment was like when she first got projected on that other planet and how everything feels, the sand, strangely, the gravity has shifted and she was still able to be grounded in the space. And this leads her to thinking about everything that her daddy told her in a technical sense and specifically about, science, the arithmetic that goes into it and everything that they were discussing about the orrery and astrology and different planets and all of that just starts to come together in her head. She also then questions again, was that lady human? The blast from the past robot lady, was she human and all of that? Just steadily questioning herself and the circumstance and then also answering her own questions, using her memory to do so as well. And she had found a way that when she specifically didn't know the answer to her questions, she was able to just sit and be and let the answers come to her in and from the space, which leads her to this table in there. And on first glance, it looks like just a regular table or whatever, but her knowledge of geometry and science and the chemistry and all of that, the algebra and all of that, calculus and carrying on, that has to do with all that, she realizes that there's a whole geometric code on here, ancient geometric code to this table ottoman looking thing here. And it becomes like an escape room type of task. And she's cracking the code and flipping the different panels off of the table and just watching in amazement to what happens. And she's steady talking. She's saying, makes the total possible combinations. And she's steady ripping the panels off of the thing. She gets about 3 of them off and just watch them float into the air. And she says 10 to the 192nd power. My gosh, 63 trillion celestial. And panoramas. Okay. And my interpretation of that is again given like ancient geometric equations and principles. So like I don't understand math real good as the way that it's taught in school, but times where I've been high, suddenly I would understand it. Like I literally, let me not say that, but I would only understand math and algebra and all that when I would be high. And a large part of it is because suddenly a new doorway would open up in my mind where I'm able to see the equations and the mathematicalness of it all through a philosophical lens and my understanding as to how life works and also my understanding of science. And that's what would make it understandable and make sense to me. And the way that this is making sense to me here with what she's discussing and going through and all of that based on my memory of my experience with math and relating to it in such a way which I just explained. They say mostly in a spiritual sense that life is endless, this universe is endless, and it's a endless world of possibilities. And that's also a philosophical concept. Endless possibilities, endless life, endless evolution, all of that. So as she's going through those numbers, and she said like 10 to the 192nd power, 63 trillion, to infinity and beyond. she's cracking a code of liberation, realizing that there's so much more to life than where she's been and where she has thought that she's at, and in her confusion about where she's currently at, like in that environment and in that circumstance at hand. So it's having her to see and experience clear as day that while she feels trapped, not only in her life that's led up to this moment, but also in this moment, in this, ship or whatever it is that she's in, she's really not trapped. And the sooner she realizes that, the sooner she is able to get out of the prison that has been made for her and the prison that she made for herself, metaphorically and in certain figurative, literal senses. So yeah, she is dissecting everything. She done took out this little like bolt thing out of the table and has made her way over to the wall to crack the code on the door. And she does it by way of the wiring and also removing like some panel pieces off of the wall, which opens the door and brings back the robotic blast from the past lady. And she looks up, she's excited, she's ready to get out of there, and the robotic blast from the past blasts her ass on across the floor and basically starts to telepathically torment and torture her in a way, as she steady and vigorously tries to run out and tries to plead with Shouty to let her out, let her go, stop this madness and this agony that she is putting her under. And the lady is just steady repeating to her, "You are not in a prison. Where do you want to be? Name yourself." And Hippolyta is just busting out laughing at this point, like, what the fuck are you talking about? And the lady said, "Where do you want to be? Name it. Name it. Name them." So it just frustrates Hippolyta to a point of just yelling out, "On stage dancing with Josephine Baker in Paris." And boom, boom, pow, she is blasted to Paris on stage dancing with Josephine Baker. Now, clearly, she don't know none of the choreography, okay? So maybe she should have included that. That's, tapping into that law of manifestation and also being careful what you wish for, what you ask for, what you pray for, because you just might get it and all of that. So, like, when they say pray and or manifest and all of that, you got to be very specific. And this is a little funny way that they tapped into it, because she said all of that, but she didn't say, and also knowing the choreography. She just said dancing. So yeah, when you ask to be somewhere, also make sure that you ask for the wisdom and the knowledge to handle where you trying to go, to be there and survive where you trying to go, okay? Don't just wish for a car. Also wish for the competency to be able to drive it. Period. Now, she up here stumbling and fumbling and wombling on across the stage, looking crazy. And you see some of the girls kind of like gently pushing her around a little bit to help her get to the spots that she needs to be at. And once they officially introduce Josephine Baker, she really starts to mess up because she just gets in awe of Josephine. And to a point where one of the girls yells at her in a whisper type way, "Stop gawking and get your moves down. Like, what's wrong with you, lady? You up here acting a fool." And finally, the show is over. Everybody's applauding. Everybody's bras also fall off except for Hippolyta's. And it's a part of the show for them to fall off. It's a burlesque type shit. And of course, if you know anything about Josephine Baker, then you know that she was highly known for performing topless. So yeah. Also, I want to point out that this lady that's playing Josephine Baker on here looks the most like Josephine Baker out of anybody that I've ever seen play Josephine Baker. So yeah. They try on off stage, get back there, and you already know the other dancers is roasting the fuck out of Hippolyta, telling her that she not ready for the big time, telling her that she ain't shit and ain't never gonna be shit. The works, honey. And one girl is telling her she got to take her ass back to where she came from. And what I see a bit happening here is a lot of the girls that are snapping on her are French girls. They are, the ones I see specifically talking to her are black and or some type of melanated person of color. They just so happen to be from France, right? We know that, if you know anything about the history, and I'm also running it down. Anyway, Josephine Baker went to Paris during this time period because it was presenting more opportunities for success, because Paris was more including of, if I'm not mistaken, I think that the LGBTQ plus community was included in that, but specifically black people and people of color, at least when it came to certain jobs and careers and entertainment and all of that. Paris was, what they call it, trailblazing for integrated entertainment shows, basically showing love to the black people and the other people of color, melanated people and all that. Now, of course, we know that there was likely still some chicory-dickory dock going on when it comes to the racial disparages and all that, but in a way like nobody else was. Paris was being inclusive and welcoming to black people and people of color that were wanting to go there and take on certain careers successfully, and specifically in entertainment. And Josephine Baker is a very prominent fixture in that particular movement, in that particular era. And another fun fact to that is that Josephine Baker had a lot of kids. I believe that most, if not all of them, were adopted, and they all were different races, cultures, and ethnicities and everything. So, yeah. Saying all that to say that these French black girls that are attacking Hippolyta, they are also referencing the fact that they, recognize that she's American and all that. Now, I can't say for sure, but it seems like one of those things that may be rooted in xenophobia. I think that would be called xenophobia in a way, but it's like some extra things to it, whereas the melanated people of a specific place, for instance, here in America, you have African Americans, and mostly when you refer to African Americans, you're referring to black people who are descendants of slaves from the transatlantic chattel slave trade. And oftentimes African Americans can feel resentment, if that's the right term, resentment for lack of better terms, towards people who come from Africa modern day, that choose to migrate to America from Africa, and they come and this also like stretches across the board to like other melanated people as well. A lot of African Americans tend to resent them because they feel like we were born here. Our ancestors were brought on a ship like a cow, goat, a chicken, stripped of their culture, stripped of their names, and completely terrorized, dehumanized, and the works, for hundreds and hundreds of years. And a lot of this stuff is still, a lot of those elements are still set in stone, and we're having to bust our ass to be accepted here, to make a living here, to gain success here. But y'all can just come over and y'all don't gotta pay taxes. Y'all aren't seen as low as we are here. Y'all get jobs faster. Y'all get a lot more what seems to be quote unquote privileges than the actual people that were born here, the actual melanated people that were born here. So that's like something that a lot of African Americans struggle with, and it causes, amongst other things, causes dissension between Africans and African Americans, and also African Americans and Asians and African Americans and Middle Easterns specifically. So I'm feeling like the same thing may have happened when it came to the whole Paris situation. The melanated people, the black people, people of color, and all of that of Paris who were born there probably felt like, wow, y'all getting to migrate over here from your good old America, having this rose-colored glasses point of view of what America is and how they're treated over there and all this and that and the third. Y'all are able to come from your good old America and come over here and take opportunities from us that we have had to struggle and bust our ass for. Like, congratulations, da 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 da. And it's understandable either way to have that type of mindset, because that type of shit is frustrating and disheartening. But that type of stuff is also often done with the intent to cause division amongst the melanated people. So I think it's a better idea to everybody just create a solidarity, melanated solidarity, and just try to help each other out and build each other up instead of villainizing each other and blaming each other and having resentment towards each other for stuff that is neither one of our faults. Like, literally everybody is dealing with the same struggle. And a lot of the times, the things that seem like privileges that the other melanated people are getting is really just a illusion and an illusion, and just a longer road to the same fucked up destination. But yeah, as they finish off berating Hippolyta, Josephine comes on in and she's like, look, now, we've all had those nights, even me, honey. Lord, you should have seen my ass back at the old Shore Forest in St. Louis. Now, here's the step. And she shows her the steps, shows her the choreography, gets her on board, and tells her, you're not in America anymore. You need to loosen up. Hey. So we see some American solidarity happen there. And we also see something, I want to say is somewhat new as it concerns the light and dark dynamics, even when it comes to skin tone, that have been shown in this show. Up until this point, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but up until this point, a lot of the light skin, dark skin dynamics that we have seen, and even white and black dynamics that we have seen as far as the characters, have been on the head bumping instance. They've been like against each other, saying a lot of the same things, but against each other, wanting a lot of the same things, but fighting against each other to get it, and having like two different realities, all the while kind of speaking the same language, right? So we got to see some light and dark harmonization happen with Letty and Ruby a little bit from their interaction once they had their talk, and Liddy took her accountability and all of that in the first half of this episode. But here, we get to see an instance, and mind you, one of the girls, at least one or two that I saw that was berating Hippolyta, were also dark-skinned girls. Just a note. But yeah, so we see Hippolyta, who's dark-skinned, Josephine Baker, who is light-skinned, have this effortless introduction, if you will, of solidarity to each other. And Josephine Baker extend that solidarity to her after seeing, how she just got treated by the French girls. So it was on some African-American solidarity, but solidarity nonetheless, and their difference in skin tones did not create a barrier. So just something I wanted to highlight and pinpoint, and we love to see it. And something else I want to point out too, remember me mentioning that, the Parisian girls may have been looking through rose-colored glasses as it concerns people's experience, let alone black people's experience in America, which is common in real life for all types of people in different countries. It's easy to have the grass is greener on the other side mindset about things. But we notice how Josephine Baker says to Hippolyta, loosen up, girl, you're not in America anymore. Now, of course, that's a callback to The Wizard of Oz, which stars Judy Garland, which has also been a fixture in this series also, okay? So, something to discuss and some, outside analysis videos for the series. But yeah, it's a callback to the movie with Judy Garland, The Wizard of Oz. You're not in Kansas anymore. All of that. Also, though, her saying, loosen up, you're not in America anymore. This is called the land of the free. But there are a lot of things that exhibit imprisonment in just different ways. Not in literal chains, but there are a lot of circumstances set up by the society that make people feel confined, like a slave, like an inmate, like you're in a prison, like you don't have permission to be flexible, to be healthily flexible, as what dance requires a healthy level of agility and flexibility. And if your mind is in a stiff place, it shows up in your body. It shows up specifically also when you dance. Okay, so message. And that's something that we'll dive deeper into as well when we get into our other analytical videos for this series. Now, we get a montage of Hippolyta going through different performances and events and everything with the girls and Josephine Baker, and she's really getting her foot in. She's really making a whole lot of friends. I also feel like I got some symbolic confirmation about the inclusion of LGBT people and all of that, because we see some girls kissing girls. We see some girls flirting with Hippolyta. We see Hippolyta lightly flirting with some girls. It's real quick flashes of these interactions, but they're there nonetheless. So this sense of freedom is being heavily expounded upon through the visuals. Also, the song that is playing is Gitchy, Gitchy, Ya Ya Da Da, Lady Mama Lord. Specifically the one by Patti LaBelle and the LaBelles. I believe they're the original performers. I believe this is the version that they're playing. Yeah, so yeah. It's giving. And Hippolyta looks damn good. She getting the moves down. She done loosened up. She's having a good old funky time. We didn't pick up back with her at the bar, and Josephine walks on over to her. There's a toast being given. They toast, they sip, and Josephine asks her if she got a match for her pre-roll. I don't know what she got in there pre-roll. It's something in there. I don't know if it's tobacco, some spices, or that other girl, okay? But they help her with a light hand, her a candelabra or whatever. And Josephine goes to saying that on nights like that, she feels like she burns so bright that she feels like a star. Watashi wa star. And Hip is basically telling her, like, I mean, you are a star, da da da. And she says, no, Shari, not like a movie star. Anyone can be that. Me, I feel like the stars in the black of space, magnificent, ancient, and already extinguished. Most of the girls never notice when she get like this. You know, just where to look. You found that same thing in yourself, haven't you? Now, there's something beautifully dark about her saying all that. Because in a perfect world, you want to feel like a star. You want to feel warm. You want to feel sought after, longed for, gazed at, important, useful, needed, valuable, wise, ancient, glamorous, all that. At the same time, the way she said, already extinguished. My interpretation of that is giving kind of tragic. Like, you know that besides the sun, You only see stars at night. You only see stars when there is darkness. So you only shine through and in darkness when things are dark. And most of the time when you're needed is when things are dark. And you're shining for other people, and you're shining to help other people see their way through the darkness. And that's just it. And by the time, it's time for morning and it's ready for the sun to get its glory, you know exactly when you're supposed to be extinguished. You know exactly when you're burning out or going to be overshined. When a whole nother grander, bigger light is going to come up and come out and make you invisible. So it's a major internal juxtaposition to feel and recognize about oneself, where you feel valuable, needed, used, sought after, desired, all that. But you also feel like there's a constant expiration date. And so I feel like Josephine is feeling like, as valuable as she is, as useful as she's been, a lot of it has been to fuel and help and guide other people. And many of those other people, and then someone else that she doesn't even know about just yet, is bound to come up and overshine her, replace her, because eventually she has to go. Tisk. And so it also kind of gives, when things are bright and lively and going well, she's not needed, she's not desired, she's invisible. But then when the darkness comes, that's the only time she can really shine and get that spotlight. Whew. That's deep, honey. That is deep. And her saying to Hippolyta that, a lot of people don't notice when she feels like that, but Hippolyta knows just where to look. And she says that she's sure that Hippolyta has had those feelings herself. And so, yes, this parallels with how Hippolyta feels in a different sense. When things are dark, her being you could call her a matriarch at this point, her being a matriarch of the family, she feels like she's only been needed, sought after, given the spotlight when it comes to her being and shining for other people, to guide them, to help them, to lift them up, to give them light, pieces of her light. But then as soon as everything is going well and everybody has their own shit going on, they don't see her. She's invisible, which can call back to the interaction that she had with Tick right before she left and sought out on this journey. She likely felt like, y'all don't see about me until you want to come and ask me for something, until you need this car, until you need me to cook, until you need nurturing, until you need a book, until you need advice and all this other shit, a titty to suck on, whatever, what have you. Y'all have not shown a fuck to give about me as I've been sitting over here grieving, and you've been lying to me. And you haven't thought once to come over here and see about me, but now you're here to take my car that I clearly need, that I'm clearly finna leave in, to do my own shit. Woo, child, a whole lot to unpack. But Hippolyta responds to her and says, being here has only shined the light on that old dead feeling. And Josephine says they don't call it the City of Lights for nothing. And the music switches to a somber one. She lets Hippolyta hit her pre-roll. And baby, I love this look on Hippolyta too. But Hippolyta says now that she's tasting it, freedom, that is. It's like she's never known before. She see what she was robbed of back then. Ooh, child. And yes, when you come into the realization, like through embracing something that you never had or something that you haven't had in a long time, while it can be very fulfilling and exciting and joy bringing, it can also make you mad because, like she said, you start to realize what you had been deprived of back then. And that can enlighten you even further to people's intentions, especially when you're the type of person that's always just tried your best to see the good in people. And you have a realization like this, it can make you feel like a fool because you like, dang, I really tried to humanize them. And in certain ways, I projected my good traits onto them, just thinking, oh, they don't know no better. They know not what they do. Extend forgiveness, extend grace and empathy and all of this sympathy and all this other stuff. But then when you have those types of realizations, they put you in a mindset like, damn, no, they did not deserve my grace. They did not deserve me trying to humanize them and see the better in them, because this whole time it was their whole total intent to strip me of my sense of freedom, not only in a physical sense, but in a mental sense, to where I would sit up and abuse and imprison myself and allow other people to imprison you. Like just a whole cycle of self-harm and re-traumatizing yourself and feeling like you have no other option but to place yourself around people and settle for people who will just reenact these traumas to you. Even if it seems like better than what you had, they are still reenacting and re-traumatizing traumas upon you. And she goes on to say, I thought I had everything I ever wanted, only to come here and discover that all I ever was the exact kind of Negro woman white folks wanted me to be. And I'm gonna definitely do a deep dive on this specific conversation that they are having for real, because it's very layered, and there are things in it where what she is expressing is going into when the ancestors were brought over here through the transatlantic slave trade and all of that. You know, it strips you of your history, it strips you of your culture, it strips you of your sense of self, and we know that, right? But it's a motherfucker. Whereas Hip is here realizing exactly what the depths of those things are, because you think culture, you think just the language and certain dances and art styles, things like that. But you don't think about how they stripped you of your original family dynamics. You don't think about how they stripped you of, yes, your spirituality, but with that spirituality came with, such as the healthiness of centering self, the healthiness of not confining yourself to a gender construct or sexual constructs, thinking that just because you're a woman, you have to do this, that, and the third. And just because you're a man, you have to do this, that, and the third. And because you're a woman, because you're a man, you can't do this and you can't do that. All of these restrictions and hyper civilization that strips you away of a genuine, authentic, divine sense of freedom. It puts you in this cycle of thinking just because you got something that's better than what you had, that is the best. And a lot of people get caught up in that, end up settling for less. Even though they got better than what they had, they still ended up settling for less because they got trapped, imprisoned into that feeling of deprivation, which made them desperate to have any little piece of what they felt deprived of, and therefore totally omit the endless possibilities of the bestest and bestest and bestest of what they could have. As Hippolyta goes on to say, she feels like they found a smart way to lynch her. So yes, these total realizations they have you looking back like, damn, they knew exactly what they were doing. We was turning the other cheek. We was giving them the benefit of the doubt. We was projecting our own humanity onto them, and this whole time they were just evil. It was their total long game plan to not only oppress, but to spin you into a cycle of oppressing yourself, thinking that you got it made, all the while feeling droggy, all the while feeling sad and unsatisfied, inflammation in your joints and your bones, and lack of motivation to do certain things that you once felt was so exciting and so fulfilling when you were a child. Honey. Just the whole cycle of keeping you from seeing the greatness of your past, and therefore imprisoning yourself to the darkness of your past, imprisoning yourself to the darkness of your present, and imprisoning yourself away from a brighter future. Keeping you at the acceptance of being just a star. When, baby, you are the sun. You were meant to be the sun. But you have kept yourself from stepping into that because you have surrendered to the prison that was set up for you by way of abuse, and so many more ways than one, which sums up to be oppression. And the smoke and mirrors and the illusions of it all. And that's some whole deeper shit. I'm gonna hold that thought and move right on along throughout this conversation and where Hippolyta is about to land herself. So, like I said, she says she feels like they found a smart way to lynch her without her noticing the noose. Boom. And Josephine says, doesn't make you angry. Hippolyta says, furious. Oh, yes. Sometimes she want to kill white folks. And then she feel mad and less than of herself. She hates herself for allowing them to make her feel small, to make her feel the way that she does. And so it just, in this cycle of hate fuels hate. So much hate being spewed at you that ends up making you hate yourself, that ends up making you hate other people, that ends up making you hate yourself because them folks that hated you made you hate other people, and you really don't want to be like that. Just a cycle of confusion, which breeds chaos. Baby, I hope y'all have the wherewithal to place for yourself and discern for yourself the many layers that this falls into that I have not explained, that you're able to form your own enlightenment from these revelations. So Josephine says to her, what else do you hate? And she's in silence for a minute, and Josephine says, well, Hippolyta, what you gonna do with all that anger? What you gonna do with all that junk inside that trunk? I'm gonna get you crunk, get you love drunk off my hump. My hump, 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 my lovely lady lumps. Check it out. No, okay. So yeah, Josephine says, what you gonna do with all that anger? I love that she asked it, because one thing that's very important in general and it's a specific important concept when it comes to spirituality, is that you don't need to demonize your anger. You don't need to think that you should never get angry, that you should never express anger. The challenge, the goal is to learn for yourself the way you are meant to be called to action by way of your anger. Anger has the purpose of calling you to action. That action does not have to be violence, be it physical, verbal, spiritual, or whatever. Violence, shows up in the different elements of it all. It's not just physical. Okay? So yeah, anger doesn't have to be violent. Doesn't have to be spiteful and revengeful or any of that. There are a multitude of ways that you can fight for yourself. But a lot of the time, as human beings, we're also animals, therefore we have a primal sense. We often have to conquer that primal sense of anger, which calls you to the action of violence first. That's the, what you could call the lower level. And the more evolved you get, you start to gain a greater understanding of how you can use your anger that doesn't then compromise your own karma, therefore does not compromise your freedom. Okay, right? Because it's illegal to physically fight, and even if it's self-defense, a lot of the time you can end up in some sticky chicory dickory dock of it all and still end up sacrificing your freedom because you felt the need to get violent, right? So violence has been normalized so much so, and even there's an episode in this series called History of Violence. So that theme reoccurs throughout the different episodes. And it's about to reoccur by way of when Josephine asks Hippolyta this question, and Hippolyta responds, she says, I am Hippolyta. I am Hippolyta. And she starts to scream it with such conviction, and to the point where she is transitioned and spit out into, I do not know exactly what age or time period this is. But if you don't know, if you must know, Hippolyta is an ancient queen in Greek mythology. And she's said to be the daughter of the god of war, which is Ares, which unmistakably sounds like Aries, the zodiac sign, right? Which is also the zodiac sign of war. And this will be something that we take a deeper dive into when it comes to the deep dive videos for this series. But just to implement that so that it connects some dots for you as we go through what she goes through in these next stages. So yes, we pick up with Hippolyta during this ancient time period, and she's going through some form of warrior training. And it's very reminiscent, buffering in public. It's very reminiscent of the scenery from The Woman King, which was portraying the Dahomey tribe. That's a whole other story. We'll talk about it in another video. But ancient warriorism taking place, and Hippolyta is in the midst of her sparring challenge with the head mistress. I don't know what you would call it in the African and or Greek terms. So that's a term I know. That's the term I'm using. So I guess you would probably say captain, maybe. Anyway, she doing all this screaming or whatever because she just been projected into this realm. And the lady said, you and all that screaming is not gonna get you nowhere. You're not making a baby. You're in a fucking fight. So this lady is going to be very reminiscent of the robotic blast from the past lady. Getting her together, putting her through anguish to bring a fight out of her, to bring a sense of healthy rage out of her that is also structured and liberated, flexible, though disciplined. So Miss Lady goes around and she giving her speech, and she says, when you fall to the ground in defeat, you may be asking yourself, why am I here? Why should I bother getting up when I know Naui is a great warrior and I cannot win? Well, I will tell you why you are here and why you must get up. You are here because you did not believe them your whole life. They told you were free. They meant you were free to cook their food, raise their children, free to work for them. They even lied to you and told you were free to run the world. And Hippolyta is steady swiping at her as she says all of this and getting kicked across the ground in the process. And she goes on to say, but it is their world. And you are here because you knew that all they offer was the freedom that all a well-kept slave could ask for. Now, I cannot tell you what true freedom is. You got to find that for yourself. But today, you are still too afraid to go looking. But Naui, will strip that fear away, one blow at a time. Now get the fuck up and raise your sword. Raise your glass if you are wrong in all the right ways. All my underdogs, we will never be. Anyway. Miss Naui was talking some hot shit and gave some enlightening revelation concerning the ties between anger and fear. Anger has to go alongside courage. But the barrier between that is fear. However, sometimes the root of all of that is fear as well. Because sometimes you are building and transferring and transmuting fear under the cloak of anger. You get mad because you feel fearful. But because you don't want to embrace that feeling of fear, you channel it into anger because you think that it is stronger. But you don't realize that even still, you are stifling the high potential of your anger. So that's crazy how life works, right? Because you could be asking for something, such as freedom. And spirit will propel you into a feast of freedom. Unless you taste it, savor it, and all that, rub it all over your face, hit somebody else in the face with it, laugh gleefully about it. And then, much like Hippolyta experience, getting that feast, then feeling some form of like buyer's remorse and resentment behind it. Placing her into this realm where, okay, you got that feast of freedom right there. You seen what it tastes like. You seen what it could be. Now, we're going to knock you 50 stages back. You're going to feel like you regressed. But in actuality, you still moving forward. This is just a different stage. And you had to get pulled back like a slingshot in order to propel forward drastically like the pebble within. Hey! So it's like, again, you are not in a prison. You didn't get knocked backwards. Like, you didn't regress. This is still a part of your progress. You just got to be pulled back so that you can fly forward effortlessly. Yes, God. So, all that being said, too, in the midst of this sparring session, like I said, Hip was still trying to attack Nawi in the midst of Nawi's speech. She was angry. She was full of anger. But she still wasn't able to conquer her. She still wasn't able to rise to the occasion. Why? Because she was still exhibiting and acting on anger from the root of fear. Therefore, it didn't have a stable foundation to actually service her. So now here we get a montage of her being trained on how to use her different emotions to service her anger, to service her acts that she takes out of anger, to service herself. Okay? And this is from the primal sense of such. So, she heads up on Nawi. She's swinging and swinging and swinging and missing, steady being dropped and knocked to the floor. But as time goes on, she starts to catch on, child. She starts to catch on. She becomes agile, yet structured, fearless, even, and determined, having her moments of vulnerability, still getting knocked down, but getting up quicker every time. Not only getting up quicker every time, but eventually getting Nawi to her knees. And I feel a need to note that she gets Nawi down to her knees. The undisciplined, angry energy would have continued to just go in on Nawi when she got her to the ground. When she got her to her knees even. Could have took a swipe at her neck. Could have stabbed her right in the forehead. Kicked her in the chest, whatever, what have you. But the high vibrational sense within this primal situation allowed for Hip to use that discipline to not just continuously go in on her. You've done your part now. You've got her to her knees. Well done. You can stop. There's no need for overkill. But the ego and being rooted in fear and other unstable foundations will have you just continuously abusing the sense of liberation that you have just welcomed yourself unto. All the while, Nawi has been standing strong and seemingly indestructible throughout this time. But she was brought to her knees. But she didn't cower. She submitted, all the while looking Hip dead in her eyes with approval. Back still straight and strong. Still maintaining her dignity. So, showing how to be knocked down, how to submit, still empowered. And upon this accomplishment, Hip goes to bow at who seems to be the queen. I believe during this time period, they probably would have called her king, because the word queen probably wasn't made or invented yet. But yeah, Hip goes and bows to her so that she can be crowned with her evolved warrior helmet. And it's beautiful too. But we conditionally and continue on to where the girls are going off into war and they fighting white men. And Hip is leading them and they going in full throttle, fearless, strong, much more stature than their opposition, baby. And they are wreaking havoc. So here Hip is doing exactly what she said she wanted to do. She said she wanted to kill some white folks. And here she go, killing the white folks, the top of their food chain to be exact, white men. Child, disc. But this is a magnificent fight scene. Again, woo! Very much so like that of The Woman King. Even though y'all know The Woman King came out after this. But it's loosely based on, I think it's loosely based on somewhere in the same time period and maybe even the same Dahomey tribe. Now, Hippolyta was Greek. Yes. So hence the term loosely. However, there's a concept of without one, there wouldn't be the other. So in certain texts of history, that would also be the case. So just keep that in mind. But yeah, it's all mirroring each other. Again, things that would be unpacked deeper during the deep dives of the series. Now, they all there, standing tall. Looks like they haven't lost not one single soldier on their side, as they have slayed everybody on the other side. And their community, their village, is looking onward upon them in this process. And Hippolyta has her own speech. She says, we are here because when they told us our rage was not ladylike, we did not believe them. When they said our violence goes too far, we did not believe them. When they said the hatred that we feel for our enemies is not God-like, they say that to women like us because they know what happens when we are free. Free to hate when we must, free to kill when we must, free to bring destruction when we must. That is our freedom. That is our prayer, no matter what they think of us after we grind them into the dust. That is our love. Yes, God. And I would add on to say, that is your self-love. Yes, anger can be used in your exhibiting of self-love because sometimes there's a time and a place for you to defend yourself in anger. Just got to make sure you got the right foundations and the right structure with it. And it's kind of reminding me of the concept on the new season of Reasonable Doubt, where it's like, it's kind of inevitable for anyone to feel remorse after they've taken someone's life, even if it was in self-defense. But it's also important that, God forbid, but if you are in a situation like that, that you have the freedom, a society and environment, a systematic structure that honors that form of self-love to do what you need to do to show the love for yourself by defending yourself by any means necessary. Because if somebody is trying to take your life, it's totally understandable why you would do what you need to do to free yourself from that, even if you have to take the other person's life. And why should you feel bad when they were trying to take your life remorselessly, So it's a whole lot in what Hippolyta was saying in her speech, but a major important part of that is in the way Black people, Black women specifically, but Black people in general, are often encouraged to just forgive and turn the other cheek and be excessively graceful to racism and racist people. Like, oh, you got to believe in God, so you got to forgive. You can't defend yourself because that's not God-like. What would Jesus do? But it ain't none of them questions being asked or things being said before the fact those terroristic racist white people and even terroristic races that still exist in our lives to this day, they're not thinking about none of that when they get ready to oppress and abuse and terrorize somebody. Black people, this and that. It's a total disregard for generations and generations and generations of people based off the color of their skin. And you're allowing them to be subjected to hell on earth by the color of their skin with no remorse, with no grace, with no forgiveness in your heart, no love, no genuine good intent. But by the response that these groups of people give you, then you want to bring up things from the Bible and all of that. And that's very reminiscent to the way that the Bible was used by white people to Black slaves to not only mentally and emotionally imprison them, to imprisoning themselves to their circumstance, but also to spiritually imprison and enslave them and set up for them to spiritually imprison and enslave themselves. Now, as she completes her speech, there's an oncoming of more soldiers. And while the rest of the girls are preparing for attack, Hippolyta is stripping herself of her helmet and her weapon and is surrendering to transition into a new timeline. Well, to a new dimension, wherever it is that she wants to go now. Something I kind of want to briefly touch on right here is that Hippolyta seems to intuitively know that it's best for her to get the fuck out of Dodge right now because she's left them with spiritual gold that they did not have before, which can help heal, because essentially she's dimension traveling, but she's also time traveling, right? So I feel like this would also be helping, you go back in time and you alter something about the time period. It has an effect on whatever present you get back to. It has an effect on the future differently than what it would have naturally would have had you not made that change. So, like I said, her leaving the spiritual gold here was a good part of her purpose for her to set her forward on her own divine path in her own lifetime, and also to inject that time period with a more progressive energy. Whereas, if and when they still lose the battle, they have a greater chance in the future of winning the whole war and other wars to come. So, healing her present and the future that we are in now in real time, right? By way of having gone back in the past and created a different frequency of healing there. I say all that to say too, because they are majorly outnumbered now by the onset of oppositions that are coming forward towards them. And that doesn't necessarily have to mean that they're going to lose their battle. But that first wave, they didn't lose no warriors. This wave, they might lose some warriors because they are severely outnumbered. But again, could go different. But that's a conversation for another time. So, as Hippolyta goes into her preparing to transition into another dimension, into another desired being of herself, she says, I am Hippolyta, George's wife. And there she spawns in bed, very wooed and swooned and feeling all gentle and delicate and everything, laid up with George. And she says, what you looking at, George Freeman? So this is a callback, and what you could say is a mirroring of the very first scene that we saw with him in this show. Laid up in the bed early morning, and she say, like, she ain't even looking at him, but she just opened her eyes and she say, what you looking at, George Freeman? And he comes over her shoulder saying, my wife. So a part of this shows that no matter what, Hippolyta would always find her way back to George. Hippolyta was going to be with George and love George no matter what. So even in her evolution, she still found her way back to him. So that's a beautiful consistency to have, because this really could have led her absolutely anywhere with anybody. But when it came down to like a man needing some companionship, romance, intimacy, affection in their way, she still went back to George. Oh, and we love to see it, honey. So yes. And it kind of flips, though, because again, this is a mirroring of that original scene. It flips to her having way more to talk about. So feeling way more of a purpose and a presence in her interaction with him, which is something that she didn't get to exhibit while he was still alive. So the extra excitement and passion is there as she is explaining to him, when I told you in that white room that I realized I wasn't in another planet at all. She's going through the motions of telling him what she just experienced through time traveling and everything. And so basically she was saying she was trying to escape, and then she realized it wasn't another planet at all, and it wasn't a time machine. And that basically through all of her memories and things that she learned, studied, and the conversations that they had, she realized she had just cracked the code on accessing many worlds, and ended up being proven to herself that the many worlds theory is correct. Told y'all, endless worlds, endless possibilities and things. Yes. So yes, she said she certainly thought they might be before, but never could she imagine anything like what she experienced. So yeah, she just excitedly telling herself how she could name herself anything and it becomes true, so be it, I say, type shit. And George is shocked and a nigga named Paul. like I don't even know what better way to describe it, because the look on his face is just like shock and awe. Okay? And he says, if you're on another planet and I'm still here right now, and she interrupts him and says she don't know exactly what it all means, but it feels real. And that's what matters to her. And I'm sure. I'm also sure that she hasn't even told him that in her original lifetime and world, he is no longer living. So they're still, even in the same reality physically here, mentally, emotionally, and spiritually, and experientially, if that's a word, they are in two different realities. Because Hippolyta is coming from a reality of having experienced many different realities in a literal sense, and also a reality where she had and lost him suddenly and beyond her complete control and beyond his control in a lot of ways, and in some ways through a passion that they both bonded over. He is living in a reality where he is simply living, and what they always knew before her most recent experience is just still the same, what they always knew. So she's like way ahead of him, even though they're still also in the same place. Everywhere, everything, all at once. Or is it everything, everywhere, all at once? You know what I'm saying, child. Moving on. So yes, he says, after all your adventures, everything you saw, you still named yourself my wife. I told you, honey. I told you. I told you. Yes. Yes. But now she's looking at him crazy. And he said, what's wrong? And she seems to be having some type of coils about this. And kind of what I think it is that she might be feeling that after everything I just told you I experienced, you barely had anything to say on all the other stuff, but it just still came back to you and what I am and what I mean to you. A little or a lot of disregard to her as an individual and appreciation for her simply as an individual with her own multi-dimensional experiences. Woo, child. And that explains also, like, in a lot of black relationships with man and woman, black man, black woman, often in the same reality, but in two different realities at the same time. Because it goes back again in simple terms. They both experience racism and oppression and are, oppositions, quote unquote, if you will, to white people in this white world, racism, segregation, and all that. All the while, they're in two different realities because George does not experience misogyny and he does not experience misogynoir. He cannot experience either of those things, and he cannot experience oppression of all different types of sorts towards women. So there's a disconnect. He's living a reality that consists of many things, but his one major thing that he identifies with and jumps over hurdles with damn near 24/7 in his life is racism. It doesn't even cross his mind like talking about how it must feel to be a black woman, which is even lower than his status as it concerns the societal hierarchy. The societal hierarchy. And he can't even imagine that just as frustrating and defeating as it can feel trying to explain racism to racist white people and implicitly biased white people who are committed to being willfully ignorant, just as frustrating and defeating as it can feel for dark-skinned people or people in general trying to explain colorism to willfully ignorant, willfully implicitly biased light-skinned people who are committed to being colorist and or disregarding and dismissing the fact that colorism exists. It can be just as frustrating trying to explain what it's like being oppressed as a woman in a society, let alone as a black woman in a society, to men. Because to black men specifically, because they will forever be in their mind like, we experience the same shit. We experience the same shit. Yeah, some of the things we experience the same, but not all of the things. There are extra things that we experience as black women, and extra things that women like Hippolyta and Ruby, and eventually Dee, and in certain ways Dee even as a child, will experience as black girls and black women that people like me, people like Letty, would not ever understand or experience. So, a lot of black men are so conditioned to be cloaked and coddled through their experience of oppression that it stunts them from the sense of empathy, of being able to think, damn, somebody else, i.e. my teammates, my counterparts, may have certain things worse than me. Tisk, 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 tisk. Which is the same barrier that a lot of white women tend to experience because they are also oppressed in this society, but they don't experience the same levels of oppression as melanated people in general. And like I was saying with, Letty and Ruby, as well as Hippolyta, with Sam and Montrose, the lighter skinned people experience racism also, yes, but you don't experience colorism. So there's a extra thick layer of empathy that you have to be willing to embrace in order to be able to listen to the difference in experience that dark-skinned people have, specifically dark-skinned black women. And as great and loving and lovable and respectable of a man as George is, and there is an obliviousness there, but there's also a lack of will there for him to embrace that thick sense of empathy that he needs to really hear the experience and the feelings that go along with that experience that Hippolyta tries to communicate to him. And that lack of will to embrace that empathy is because he is drunk off of the benefits that come with dismissing her experience, which is the same thing that is present in racist white people and implicitly biased white people who are committed to acting like racism don't exist, as well as light-skinned people who are committed to acting like colorism does not exist. They lack the will to embrace that sense of empathy that would allow them to listen and acknowledge it, because they are too attached and drunk off what they sense is a benefit from the oppression itself. And if they call it what it is, their conscience is going to eat them the fuck up. And their potential laziness may also eat them the fuck up. Then they will actually have to start trying and or trying harder to make themselves be the better or the best that they think they are, that other people think they are, with the scales being unbalanced as they are. They may realize that they're fucking mediocre and that they've chosen mediocrity up until this point. Now, I ain't going in on George, but it came from somewhere. It's rooted in reality. And like I said, it doesn't completely shoot down all of the good attributes of George. It just shows his flaw. Even he has it in him, as a flawed human being, to do something and be engaged in something, be it mindfully or mindlessly, that is unsavory, that is communicating how much he loves and appreciates his wife and all this and that. All the while, he shows a lack of will to embrace her struggle on a real, raw, uncomfortable level that doesn't serve him. And it does have the possibility to serve him by allowing him to evolve on a real, authentic level. But he would have to sacrifice the superficial benefits that he thinks he's already getting by way of how it's always been. Crazy how you can be clutching to grains of sand because you think it's so great. All the while, you could be gaining gold. But because you're not willing to sacrifice that sand, you give up all the gold. Tisk. But continuing on through this scene in this episode, let's go ahead and start trying to wrap this up because it's winding down. We get the last couple of minutes. But y'all know I am highly thoughtful, and there'll be a lot going on in this brain, and it's a lot going on in this show. So when you put my brain and this show together, you just get a whole lot. But it's all some good stuff. It's a method to the madness. So she starts to say to George, I think now I can name this thing that's been eating away at me so quiet. Sometimes I thought I was tired, sad, or missing you when you were out on the road, but really I was angry. So angry because for so much of my life, I've been shrinking. When I was a kid, I thought I was big enough to have every right to name something out of this world, and then I just started shrinking myself. By the time I met you, I'd already gotten so small, and I thought you knew how big I wanted to be. I thought you saw me, but you just stood by and let me shrink myself more for you. Child, honey. So what she's saying is encompassing, even more depth in a way that, she can only speak, and the writers who understand this particular experience can only speak type shit. A lot of what I just said, him being comfortable with her being small as it benefits him. His response says, and, to give him a little bit of grace, like she said, by the time she got to him, because her feelings of shrinking are going all the way back to when she named that star and the credit was taken from her. Totally traumatic, totally understandable. So she says by the time that she got to him, she was already so small, right? But like she said, she thought he knew how big she wanted to be. And I feel like that's obvious. If we could notice about her within a couple of episodes, how could he not have known, having been with her way longer, having known her way longer? So it's like, he says, Hippolyta, why didn't you tell me that you felt this way? And she could easily say, oh, I didn't know myself. I really just had the revelation, But the thing is, my dude, mindfully or mindlessly, you knew. And we also discovered you weren't willing to a whole lot of deals. But you Montrose and Sam, because we saw multiple times her showing eagerness and enthusiasm and sometimes even overzealousness to get out on the road, to do a travel guide journey by herself, with him, or whatever, but just to be the lead of it. It was constantly said by her in way more ways than one, including verbally. So again, it's understandable for a percentage of obliviousness to be there, but at the same time, you wasn't as oblivious as you trying to make it seem. Because Hippolyta even says, I tried so many times. You had to see that. And he says, maybe I did, but I fell in love with you because you were so curious, and I knew deep down inside there was a discoverer in you. But, and he just pauses. And it's like, yeah. He says, you're right. Yeah, she is. You knew it. You knew it. But you didn't feel an urgency, and you didn't feel a will to embrace that, because you were comfortable with the fact that she would allow you to use her as a stepping stone and as a star to all your dark nights. And with her just being grateful to just be chosen and revered and doted on as your wife. And he goes on to say, yes, I let you do all of that so that I can go and do what I have to do, and we could still have a family, and I know that you were safe at home waiting for me. Unfortunate. But he apologizes, and it's very dope, that beyond dope, that Hippolyta got to have this experience, especially being the fact that George is no longer alive, so she was able to hop to another dimension and, have all these experiences that led up to this one, to be able to have this conversation that she didn't get to have with him, and it helped establish a new evolved form of peace and freedom within her, having been his wife and having felt confined, but now like embracing a new sense of freedom. Because I would imagine, like, and I've witnessed quite a few women go through what seems to be this stage. My grandma is one of them, that their husbands died, and for a long time, even though they loved their husbands and all that, they still knew that in some way they had been imprisoned to being their wives and to the marriage that they had with their husbands. So once their husbands die, they feel this new sense of freedom, but in the midst of their grief and in the midst of their grooming in certain ways, the residual feelings and identity issues and things left behind from potentially being groomed, depending on the dynamics of what the relationships and marriage were, they have resentment towards the freedom, much like we've already discussed throughout this whole episode with Hippolyta's experience and all of it. And so it can send them into this endless cycle of their different identities being divided and fighting each other. And I feel like before he set off on this journey, how she did, that's how she felt. Like all of her different identities were divided and opposed to each other and fighting the fuck out of each other. And it's also revealing that as strong as she is, this vulnerability and this need for validation and gratification still exists. And as it exists, it still doesn't take away from her strength. So like I said, he apologizes to her. He says, I see now what they cost you. And they kind of sit in a moment for a little bit. And he goes to embrace her in the moment. And she sits there. She's kind of resisting to it, but also allowing of it. And he says, I see you now, Hippolyta Freeman. And I want you to be as big as you can be. And she says, I am Hippolyta. Once again. And she follows it up with saying, Discoverer. She is Hippolyta, the Discoverer. And they touch in this pink and blue spiral, fluorescently orbs around their wrist. And she ends up being transported to a whole nother world. And it's this voiceover saying, you don't exist. You don't exist in this society. You're invisible. Something else that we'll unpack in another deep dive video. So there are these little webbed feet, look like webbed feet aliens bringing them stuff, and they're just exploring this whole other world with each other. Looks as though they could be on a different planet, but it's a whole nother world. It's very aquatic, but they don't seem to be in water. But they clearly have to wear these oxygen things on their heads. So that's gonna be something real interesting to unpack as we get into the deep dive videos and all of that. So I'm gonna definitely be committed to getting these review videos out the way. Still giving them, all the attention and everything that they need. But definitely make a note to go ahead and commit to finishing these reviews in a timely manner so that we can get to the deeper dives of everything. So, yeah. Hippolyta ends up relinking with the blast from the past robot lady. And she says to her, you've gotten to name yourself, Hippolyta said she got curious. And Miss Lady said, now that you named yourself, we can fully integrate you into the society. You no longer need the devices on your wrist. And Hippolyta says, is the change permanent? And Miss Lady says, yes. And Hippolyta says, and if I don't want to change, I can just go back to the portal that brought me here, right? And she says, yes, we can send you back to your Earth. And Hip thinks about it. And she says, home. Again, this gives a callback to, you could say the Wizard of Oz, but really the Wiz, as she says, home. Because instead of Somewhere Over the Rainbow, which you can still apply that song here, but instead of Somewhere Over the Rainbow, the song Home is the signature song in the Wiz. So even though they're not playing the song here, if you know anything about their correlation, you can hear that song ring off inside of you as Hippolyta has this revelation and conversation and embrace with the blast from the past robot lady. So yeah. And Hippolyta says, how can I fit in everything that I am now into the world where I come from? And she kind of zaps away and all of that. And we see the different figurines of where she's been, like kind of done in a constellation style, if you will. And we hear her remember D. And it's like, D needs me. Like she's steady thinking about it and all of that. Still just like in the trance in the middle of everything. It then flashes and we see Tick be spit out of the portal back into the Earth realm. And he like, what the fuck? Hippolyta, what the hell going on? He looking around, still seeing like the white cops and all of that laid out. He started tinkering and stuff on the big old machine or thing and all of that, kind of in a panic. It's a siren approaching. It's a whole lot going on and nothing at all. The machine looks like it done powered down. He got the Lovecraft Country book in his hand. He is trying to figure out what the heck is best to do. Got to think on his feet. So he's trying to get on down. He grabs something and he gets on down. We hear the siren growing louder. Pump it louder. One of the cops is laying on Dee's comic, Orinthia Blue. And we get a zoom in view of the figurine on the cover of Orinthia Blue. And it basically reveals to us that final world that Hippolyta found herself in, hence where she also is being recollected about Dee and her need for her, that was the world of Orinthia Blue. And Hippolyta had blue hair and the same costume-ish, the same clothes and all of that on as Orinthia Blue on the comic. And as it zooms in on that cover, we have this revelation as the audience. The show concludes there. Oh my gosh. And there's so much I could say on that final topic that we get there, that final reveal that we get there, Orinthia Blue and all that. But I'm gonna save it for where it picks up. And it's discovered in the following up episodes, and also that'll be a deeper subject in a deep dive video for this episode in the series. Woo, child, I ain't gonna lie. As I already knew that this episode was gonna do, it took a little bit up out of me. It energized me. But it's definitely time for me to allow my voice to rest and allow my brain to just kind of be. Now, I definitely gave good elaborations on all of the things. So, with all that being said, child, if I do say so myself, honey, I have milked this cow dry. And before I continue on with the outro, I hope I was able to make everything make sense, because there was so much going on at one time. Like, this episode is very loaded, and I already knew it was gonna be, an enjoyment and a challenge for me. Because it's one thing to watch it and take it in as you do, but it's another thing to do that and then also have the capacity, let alone exercise the capacity to express and expound upon what your experience and point of view and knowledge and all of that is behind it. So yeah, I hope y'all was able to be thoroughly educated and entertained. Now, once again, with all that being said, child, if I do say so myself, honey, I have milked this cow dry. And I'm thoroughly appreciative of the exchange of vibes. And if you're feeling synchronized, please do me a divine design and like, share, and subscribe so that you can be one of the first to be back through these queenly quotas for the next time. And be sure to bless my comment section with your questions and conversations. And as always, I bid you in all ways light, love, healing, and liberation. Emphasis on liberation. Mwah.